Hello, welcome. Welcome to today's event in celebration of the 10th anniversary of the University of Chicago Center in Beijing. The title of today's event is China Reach, Promoting Early Childhood Development in Rural China. My name is Amanda Woodward. I'm the Dean of the Division of Social Sciences at the University of Chicago, and I'm so glad that you're with us. Let me start with a couple of housekeeping details. Before we begin, just a couple points to go over. If you'd like to listen to today's program in Chinese, click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select Chinese. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit questions in either Chinese or English throughout the event. The social sciences in China, at the University of Chicago have a very strong connection to China. There's long been an important area of engagement in social sciences between University of Chicago faculty and their Chinese colleagues. As an example, Professor Fei Xiaotong, credited with establishing the fields of modern anthropology and sociology in China, was an early and frequent collaborator with anthropologists at the University of Chicago. And his interest in the field was initially sparked during a visit of University of Chicago famed sociologist Robert Park to Yenching University. Our researchers are deeply committed to joint work with and about China across the social sciences, including in economics, history, anthropology, political science, psychology, sociology, and beyond. These partnerships take many forms, from individual researchers working directly with a small set of colleagues to large-scale joint research initiatives. Some of our best examples are in the field of economics, including the Becker-Friedman Institute for Economics China, which you heard about in the event just 2 days ago, the Energy Policy Institute at Chicago, China, and, as we'll hear today, Professor Heckman's joint initiatives with the Institute for Economic and Social Research at Jinan University. In terms of the center in Beijing, whose anniversary we're celebrating this month, 2 of its 3 faculty directors over the past decade have been social scientists, Professor Dali Yang of the Department of Political Science and Professor Judith Farquhar of the Department of Anthropology. Their guidance has helped establish the University of Chicago as a thought partner for advancing both science and society in collaboration with our Chinese colleagues. Let me now say a bit about the project that we're going to be hearing about. The Rural Education and Child Health Project, which is called China Reach, is a groundbreaking early childhood randomized control trial focused on the relationships between parenting, community support, and nutrition for China's left-behind children. The trial was designed to evaluate the impact of China's Children Nutrition Improvement Project in poverty-stricken areas in conjunction with well-known parenting and psychosocial stimulation curriculum, which the University of Chicago team has previously evaluated in different settings. The ultimate goal of this project is to inform China's national and provincial governments and provide evidence toward a new national health and parenting policy focused on the specific needs of this rural population. The project is conducted in collaboration with the China Development Research Foundation, whose mission is to advance good governance and public policy to promote China's economic development and social progress. Now let me introduce you to our wonderful panelists. We have a fantastic set of researchers to talk with you. Our first guest is Mr. Lu Mai, whose service as Vice Chairman of the China Development Research Foundation and Secretary General of the China Development Forum. Under his leadership, the China Development Research Foundation made significant progress in international dialogue, executive training, policy research, and social programming. In 2011, the leading group office of Poverty Alleviation and Development of the State Council named Mr. Lu one of the national pioneers in poverty alleviation and development. Mr. Lu earned his bachelor's in economics from Beijing College of Economics and his master's in public administration from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Next, I'll introduce my colleague, Professor James Heckman. Professor Heckman is the Henry Schultz Distinguished Service Professor of Economics and Director of the Center for the Economics of Human Development here at the University of Chicago. Professor Heckman is a Nobel Memorial Prize winner in economics and an expert in the economics of human development, indeed a pioneer. Professor Heckman serves as the founding director of the university's Center for the Economics of Human Development, overseeing a comprehensive and groundbreaking research program that identifies and explores the circumstances under which people develop the skills necessary to thrive in the current economy and achieve their fullest potential. And then finally, let me introduce Jin Zhu. Jin Zhu is a research associate at the University of Chicago. She joined the Center for the Economics of Human Development as the inaugural postdoctoral scholar for the Asian Family in Transition Initiative. Her research related to the China Research Project focuses on identifying latent skills in children, understanding child skill development process, and designing and studying interventions aimed at accelerating the child learning process. So welcome all, and thank you for joining us this evening. Now, I'd like to ask Professor Heckman to provide some background and frame the issues that the collaboration is addressing. Professor Heckman?
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Amanda, for the kind introduction. And I thank the university for the opportunity to describe my research briefly. This is joint research, as Amanda said. And what I want to do is provide some background for the presentation today. So let me have the first slide. Okay, China's human capital is basically a success story of the last 70 years. In the last 40 years, its growth has been fueled by substantial physical capital investments applied to a large stock of medium-skilled labor that was acquired before the 1979 reforms. But what's happening is this large supply of medium-skilled labor is running dry. Next slide. The dependency burden in China is growing, and it's building a skilled workforce that meets this demographic challenge by substituting skills for bodies. And by allowing more to be a more skilled workforce, China can transition to more productive technologies. Next. But with this rapid growth in China, it's produced rising incomes, but it's also produced substantial inequality and regional imbalances. Next. So if you look, for example, at the urban-rural income ratio in China over the last 30 years or so, you can see enormous disparity. That basically it's sometimes as high as 3 to 1 or even higher, but even now today, it's very, very high. Next. Migration out of rural China has been a powerful engine for the growth, but it has created its own problems. Next, please. Migrant workers who leave their hometowns are a large number of the population, and they work in other places. So show the next slide, please. There were basically close to 300 million migrant workers in China in 2018. Now, a big chunk of those migrant workers are in their own provinces, but anybody who knows China knows the provinces are huge. But even 26% of the entire migrant population is outside their province, which means the commute is even higher. So what's found is that there's an enormous number of people away from their initial home base, even if they live in the home province. Next, please. And what's as a result of Chinese policy, which is changing as we speak now, it's being discussed. There is an enormous difference between the percentage of the urban population living in the area and those with so-called hukou policy. And the difference, the hukou policy is a policy that allows individuals access to the services in those areas where people are living. And so you can see the gap, if anything, has been growing in the last 20 years or so. Next slide, please. And this leads to a problem of left behind children. The policy is such that when migrants come to these towns, their children can't attend the regular public schools, and they're given inferior or not at all any public services. Next slide, please. So what we have is we can see a large population of what Amanda referred to as a left behind children. And so we can see as of 2010, This is the number of million of children in China. Everything in China is, of course, very, very big. We can see that the number of migrant children is enormous, but the number of left behind children, people living in the rural areas away from at least one parent, has grown to over 60 million. Next slide, please. And if we look at those families, what we see is that over a third are not living with both parents. So they're living in what would be called families where they're living with maybe just the grandmother taking care of them or some other relative. And so this means there's a large number of children who are growing up in adverse environments where neither parent is, both parents are not present, and at most one child is present. And this creates huge problems. Next slide, please. And so if we look, for example, at the structure of left behind children in 2010, we can see that a large number of those families living with the grandparents only are living with grandparents who have basically primary school education. The parents will have middle school or high school education, but the grandparents are much less educated. And that creates a very unfavorable environment for the children growing up. Next slide, please. And this shows up in math test scores in China. So for example, if you look at children who are growing up in the rural areas versus children growing up in the urban areas, we can see that the math test scores are at the huge gaps between the bottom and the top in terms of children from rural and urban provinces. Next slide, please. And so what this has led to is an enormous gap in the registration and the enrollment in colleges and even in junior and senior high school between rural children and urban children. And this creates, so these early environmental conditions matter greatly in shaping the lives of the children. And this counterpart in actual high school and college graduation is this huge gap, which we see in front of us today. So that's the background on the project, trying to essentially remedy the early life environments of the rural left behind children.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'd like to turn the floor to Mr. Liu and ask if he would give us his insights on the China Reach program, the work of the Child Development Research Foundation, and also to describe some of China's ongoing efforts to reduce poverty. Mr. Liu?
Thanks, Amanda. First, congratulations for 10 years anniversary for the University of Chicago in Beijing Center. And in this difficult time between US and China, this center and the general work of University of Chicago with the Chinese side is very valuable. Professor Heckman just talk about the background of China Reach program. I would like to follow what he said. The first, Professor James Heckman is a Nobel laureate and very good friends of CDRF. So we got to know Professor James Heckman in 2012, and he shared his paper and the books with us in that two years. That one, Giving Kids a Fair Chance, is a guidebook for this project. And he attended the China Development Forum to give a lecture to multinational companies, the CEO, and also he gave a talk and a lecture to Chinese audience, including Chinese government official, academic, and totally is 7 times in 9 years. So we very appreciate his work. And he helped us to start this China Reach program. He is our advisor. He accepted that. We are very honored and very appreciate that. And as an advisor, he really do a serious work to help us. He helped us to organize the conference in Chicago to choose a model of China Reach by recommend Jamaica model. And that's 2014. And then we started the experiment 2015 in Gansu Huaqi province, Huaqi County, Gansu province. And then he came to evaluate the project and organize a seminar with Professor McGrady and organized the center with Tsinghua Renmin University. This is the result from our evaluation, but I will not talk in detail. After that, Dr. Zhou Jin did a wonderful work to analyze those data and get to the detail. In general, this project is really helpful for children in the disadvantaged environment and improve their cognitive skill, but also social skill, and they can control very well and focus on their attention to the learning. So it's very good result to show. And those we're proud of the home visitor we have. And those are Chinese character. We hired the home visitor in the local. They are in the village, graduated from high school, and got the training and then work. They have a passion and they work very good. And they got the respect. The farmers like them to come, and the children like them. So look at their clothes that they wear when we go to anywhere. They like that. In 2019, Professor Heckman visited China again and go to the one pilot county, which in Nimu, Tibet. That's very high altitude. And he gave a lecture to the home visitor, and he visited the farmers. Look, those picture. So we compared this with the other county without the project. We did a survey in 20 counties, which shows the treatment is the children who is delayed, development delayed, is only 8%. But in general, this is 27% by average. And in nationwide, it's only 5%. So it's significant improved, but it still need a lot of work to do. This shows in the poverty area, we can see the absolute poverty. Chinese already get rid of that in all those poverty-striking area. The people's living standard improved, and their income raised, environment improved. But the children need more care and better the treatment, the better intervention, so that they can catch up with the national level. So we are very appreciate with the collaboration with University of Chicago. We believe those children need help from the beginning, from womb and to the job. So we will use Chinese methodology, Chinese to fit the Chinese situation, but we need help and need acknowledge guidance from our friends. So those are some summary about China's REACH program. Thank you. And I would like to take this opportunity to say it again. Thanks Professor James Heckman to be a valuable advisor. Thank you, University of Chicago.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mr. Liu. Now, I'd like to welcome Jinju to come to tell us about some of the initial findings from this really impressive large-scale project. So I'll turn it over to you, Jin.
Hi. So I want to introduce more details about the China REACH program and also the evaluation about the China REACH program. So the background, I think everyone already know, like the first site of the China REACH program is implemented in Huachi County, which is one of the poorest county in Gansu province. And also, as we all know, Gansu province is one of the poorest provinces in China. And in terms of the background is about 40% of children's father work outside of the county, and also many mothers work daily. As a result, many families, the grandmother act as the main caregiver. And the sad story is the education level for those grandmothers is not that high. Even 40% of them do not have any formal education background. So one thing I want to highlight the China REACH program interventions. The first thing is who are the home visitors. The home visitors of China REACH program is slightly different from other early childhood intervention program because other early childhood intervention program have very strong requirement about home visitors' education background. But for China REACH program, the home visitor all come from the local county and their education levels is the same as the children's mother. So what does that mean? So if the China REACH program is successful, it will be very easily replicated in other regions in China. And the second thing I want to highlight, that is the intervention is use the home delivery model. That is the trained home visitor will visit each household every week and provide 1 hour parenting and caregiving guidance and to interact with the caregiver and the child. So the home visitor will teach the children based on the Jamaican REACH-up curriculum and to improve the children's multidimensional skills that covers language, social, emotional, and cognitive skills. In terms of our team, we try to evaluate the children enrolled in the China REACH program and to see whether the skills developed well in terms of their growth, skill growth trajectory. And in terms of the skill categories, we will evaluate fine motor, gross motor, cognitive, language, and social emotional skill. In this table, we show the average treatment effect on the Denver 2 test, the standardized score. And from this table, first thing we want to highlight is we found significant impact on the language and cognitive skill. And also we found the China REACH program also boosts the fine motor and social emotional skill. The second thing I want to highlight is if you look at the size of the treatment effect, for example, at the midline, the midline is about 9 months exposure of the intervention. And the treatment effect on language and cognitive skill is about 0.7 standard deviation. And at the end line, that is about 22 months exposure of the program. And the treatment effect is about 1 standard deviation. So compared with other early childhood intervention, this scale is very big. And one of the largest, early childhood intervention. And so since we already found the China REACH program is really effective and we want to understand what is the underlying mechanism to boost the children's skill development. And so in this table, we try to compare the high performance treated village and the low performance treated village. So here, the high performance treated village is defined as the top 10 villages with the language and the cognitive skill treatment effect, and bottom 10 village of the language and the cognitive skill treatment effect is defined as the low performance treated village. And what we found is the interaction quality really matters, and the good interaction quality is significantly higher for the high performance villages. So that provide one potential reason for the program boost the children's skill development. And in our another current research, we try to study how the quality of the interactions affect the children's skill performance. And one result we show up in this table, that is, we find the quality, interaction quality between the home visitor and the caregiver significantly improve the children's task performance. And in our paper, we also show this result is consistent in terms of multidimensional skills, not just for the cognitive skill, and also it is true for language skill, fine motor skill, and social emotional skill. So on average, the size is about 0.15 standard deviation. This size is very sizable compared with the value-added literature. So that means the interaction quality is one thing we need to be careful to boost the children's skill development. And since we have new method to estimate the individual's latent skills, and we can evaluate the treatment effect on the children's latent skill. And what we found is the treatment effect, the China REACH program significantly boosts the social emotional skill, fine motor skill, language, and cognitive skill. But we do not find significant impact on the gross motor skill. In terms of the language and the cognitive skill comparison, in this figure, we try to compare the density between treatment group and the control groups. From figure, you can clearly see the children in the treatment groups, the density of language and cognitive skill is significantly larger than the language and cognitive skill in the control groups. And also we plot the empirical CDF between these two groups. And also we can find the empirical CDF for the treatment groups is first order stochastic dominant the CDF for the control group children. And we found similar finding for social emotional skill and also fine motor skill, but we do not find a significant impact on the gross motor skill. All this finding is consistent with our previous analysis. And we mentioned, also Professor Heckman mentioned, and Mr. Rumai also mentioned, the China REACH program closely follow the Jamaican Reach Up and Learn curriculum. So the Jamaican Reach Up and Learn curriculum is very successful, and now their model is replicated in many countries around the world. And our UChicago team is also conduct a long-run treatment effect evaluation. And so far, up to age 30, we still found significant treatment effect on multidimensional skills and also their education achievement and also their labor market outcomes. So the reason we want to compare the China REACH and the Jamaican Reach Up and the Learn program, and we want to see whether at early stage, those two programs can produce similar size of treatment effect. In table 6, you can see we lay out the skills in 4 different dimensions. In terms of the treatment effect size, we do not find a significant difference between these two programs. That means at early stage, the China REACH program can produce almost the same size treatment effect as the Jamaican Reach Up and Learn program. And in this figure, we also plot the estimated skill growth curve comparison between these two programs. And you can see that these two programs are very comparable in terms of the skill growth curve. That means that it is highly possible to have long-term effect for China REACH program. And the good thing is our team will keep following up the children in the China REACH program, and we will study the long-term effect of the China REACH program. And also we will examine the mechanism of the China REACH program and conduct the research about optimal strategy of the parent and children interactions. And finally, we hope our analysis could help all the children in China, even all the children in the world, to achieve better life outcomes. I will end here.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So now I'd like to ask Lu Mai and James Heckman to join us back on screen, and so we can have some discussion. See if we can get videos back up. There we are.
Okay.
Gotcha. Just wait. Lu Mai, are you there?
Yes.
Oh, great. We hear you. We don't see you, but we hear you. So that's good. We hear you. I wanted to start there with you. Great. just wait a minute here. Very good. Well, this was fascinating introduction. And now I'd like to open up just some initial discussion among the panelists. And following that, I'll open it for questions from the audience. So just as a reminder, those of you attending the event, you can type your questions into the Q&A function, and then in a bit I will turn to them and we can ask this group of panelists your questions. But let me start with one of my own. Lumai, it's amazing to me the scale of this project, how many families and how many people working on the project to do the interventions were necessary. And so I wonder if you could give us a sense of how your team was so successful in mobilizing local government entities and such a large number of families for this project.
First, any number in China is not so big. So 15,000 is a small number. Our target is 8 million children aged 0 to 3 in the poverty-struck area. They live in 160,000 villages. That's the final goal for us to help 8 million people. But now we are very glad to see the project already started from one county in Huachi, Gansu province, now extended to 11 counties in 10 provinces. So that's the number of 15,000. But we raised the fund from a company and the individuals to finance this project. The cost for one person is got home visiting is about $450 per year. Basically, is the payment for home visitor and the training and the supervisor. So to convince the government to spend several billion, $3 billion in this project, we still need to work harder to convince them, to show Georgians the result, to show the theory of Professor Heckman. But most important is we implement that in the large scale, and then government will look at it very carefully.
Yeah, wonderful. Professor Heckman, when we met just to talk a bit initially ahead of this panel, one of the things you pointed out is that all collaborations meet the interests of all the parties collaborating in different ways. They have this bidirectional or multi-directional effect. And so, well, it's quite obvious the benefits of this project in terms of policy and intervention in China. I wondered if you could talk about the other kinds of effects in terms of the capacity of this project to contribute to fundamental new research findings and to expand our understanding of intervention effects and human capacities.
Well, the benefit of this project, of course, as Lumai has already pointed out, is we built on previous work by Sally McGregor, who was recently named a Dame of the British Empire for her work on developing early childhood programs. And her work was basically designed for low-income groups, where essentially high-end early childcare programs of the kind that are popular in the US just weren't feasible. And what she got through her intuition and through her long experience, she lived in Jamaica for many years. She's an epidemiologist trained at University College London and now living back in London. But during that period, she developed some protocols, really understanding what were the successful ingredients of early childhood programs. And she really got to the essence of home visiting. And home visiting, not just in the sense of a home visitor talking to the child, but a home visitor talking to the parent, teaching the parent how to play with the child, because of course the parent's there most of the life of the child, or at least the caregiver is there. It's not always the parent, as we said. And so it's very exciting that this work has been done. Now, I've been working on Jamaica, and we have this evaluation, like Zhu said. We've now looked at the children in the first round Jamaican project at age 30, and we see very successful effects through age 30 on income, crime reduction, education, and so forth. And so what this program did, what we could do, is we could, based on their previous experience, collect much richer data, much richer information, and learn from their mistakes and adapt to the Chinese situation at the same time. And the most interesting feature of the data that we have from a purely empirical standpoint, this is pure scholarship by itself, is that we have weekly visits between the home visitor and the caregiver, and measures of child development at a weekly level. And we have this over a period of close to 3 years, 2.5 years. In addition, we have inventories once a month of the home. So just some measure from another person visiting, an observer, a person who's you might want to say an overseer or some kind of supervisor, comes in and checks how the home environment has also been improved. And so we get a very high frequency reading on what's going on in the home and how that's helped child development. And so as a result, we have some really new knowledge that will contribute, I think, to the end. You're a child development expert yourself, and I think you'll appreciate how valuable this kind of data really is and how unique it is. And so right now, Zhu and I are writing up a paper. We've written several with the group at CDRF, understanding exactly what the mechanisms were and exactly what feature of the home visit's most important. And in the table that Josiane put up, there was a important interaction. It was the interaction between the caregiver and the home visitor that essentially turned on the whole process. And it seems to be very powerful. And we actually have several different ways to analyze the data. They're showing a consistent story. So from a piece of scholarship, if we thought nothing about the people of China, the children of China, the future of China, this is an interesting study. But it's even more interesting because it has such important implications for such a major country and such a poor group of people living out in the West, Gansu and Tibet and places where this program is being placed by CDRF. That I think will have a nice symbiosis between knowledge generation, and also public policy. And so they'll enrich each other. And of course, the original Jamaican elements are still there. They're still, Sally and her team are still carefully observing and recommending what we're doing. So the body of knowledge is not just in China, not just in Jamaica, but we're also synthesizing evidence from other studies around the world as well, just to see what common elements there are. So it's exciting in many dimensions. Very University of Chicago in the sense of providing, I think, stimulating research, but I think relevant research too.
Absolutely. It's astonishing to me, really, that an intervention from one cultural context in Jamaica ended up being so effective in a completely different cultural context.
But see, what's interesting about that, I think it's exactly the right point, I think, is that what this is really suggesting is something very universal about child development. That it's this interaction between the mother, the caregiver, the environment, and the child that's fostering it, whether it's in Chinese or in English or in Swahili or Portuguese as one of our other partners. So I think that's right. It's sort of, to me, it's like a laboratory experiment almost. We're isolating something, a part of an intervention that seems to have universal effectiveness in many, many different cultural environments.
Yeah, fantastic. Lu Mai, you talked a bit about the challenge of getting resources directed at an intervention of this scale and how important it is to have evidence about the effectiveness of an intervention. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about the aspects of the findings or the ways in which the data coming out of this project may be helpful in advancing the policy goals.
Yes. Totally in China for 0 to 3 is about 50 million of children. So each group try to compete to get attention and to get a fund. In the urban, they talk a lot about they need care, they need about better knowledge and help from government and from the market. They are very powerful. So who care about those bottom 20% of children? They do not be seen because they live in a remote area. They did not to be here because they are too small. But our goal, our mission is to help them, disadvantaged family, disadvantaged children. Now there's a very powerful media, self-media, TikTok. Now we use that for home visitor to show their work. And now the people donate money for this project. It's useful. But if we want to cover 8 million children, we need to get a fund from a central government budget. Now it's difficult time. The budget revenue is difficult because the economy and because the government cut the tax rate for the company and for the people. So that's the issue, is who is in the priority and what should be government do. That's I hope this year or next year, government will make a big decision on this because government started the next 5 years plan. And this is a part of the goal for the government, the equalization, social equity issue is a big issue for the Chinese government. So Professor James Heckman's idea, invest earlier years, and it will save a lot for the future of government expenditure. And the skill we get from earlier days will help in the further development in the people. So all those are very powerful, but we need to show in those remote areas. Although it's difficult, we cannot send graduate from a college or university, the people to go to the village. That will be too costly. But we need to hire the local, the young women to do this job. So Professor Heckman mentioned that the monitoring, that training, that the content from a local, from a Chinese culture, all those are important for Chinese model. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, right? You know, as a developmental psychologist, the brilliant and seminal insight from Professor Heckman's work that investments in early childhood education have the biggest effect, the biggest payout along the line, makes complete sense with everything I learned theoretically in graduate school, of course. And so it's wonderful to see the real world power of that idea in this context and in so many others. Xinzhu, I wanted to ask you a question, which has to do with the opportunities. You're a relatively early career scholar. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about the opportunities for your research development in this project. It must be a very exciting project for you to be able to be involved in this point in your career.
Yes, I feel I'm so glad and I can join this project. And also, you know, like I'm also super lucky, like because when I joined the center, Mr. Luma already started the project and also collect the data and gave me the opportunity to conduct the research. And also during this, the whole procedure about the research, and also I learned a lot from my advisor, Professor Heckman, and also not just about, the training in terms of the, my skills, and also there are many dimensions, for example, how to contact with others and how to organize, for example, the big event, and also how to, communicate to others. And it's a sort of like multidimensional improvement for my, skill set. It's not just the only target the cognitive, skill set. And in terms of this intervention, and also we found the China Rich intervention is also target the multi-dimension skill. And the other thing is we really, so I think I also play some kind of role in terms of the connection between our U Chicago and with the CDRF, because actually I do have some kind of experience. I did like a 6 months internship at CDRF, like when I was still a master's student. So I think the whole experience is different between like, in the NGO institution and also like in the research institution. But in terms of both institutions, I learned a lot. And the first thing is I know what should be the most important thing to do. It is like not just to do the right thing, and also we need to set the right goal. And then after we have the right goal, and we can do the research and step by step. And also it will, I hope like my whole career, like in terms of research, could help like, the children's, or like the whole, could contribute to the whole research and help the people to understand how to improve the, the skill development for the over life cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. As we've been talking, questions are building up, so I want to turn to the audience questions now. Here's a great one. I'll just ask it of all of you. Do you anticipate that these children will grow up and move away from the rural village? That is this a one-generational need? Who will give birth to the next generation of children if so many people of childbearing age that have moved away, and which is what has happened, the questioner asked to children's parents. So there's several questions here. One is, what are the multi-generational effects? And do you expect that children who benefit from this intervention will move away from their village or instead stay there?
Who want to answer first?
James, okay, I can say. Yes, China is in the very quickly the urbanization. We expect the next 15 years, the more farmers will move to the city, but also located in the city. So we already see in the village that the number of children is reduced. But anytime who live in the children, who live in the village, the poor is the one. So as long as the children in the village, we need to take care of them. Now the home visitor, they did not go to the kindergarten. They did not receive any intervention, but they understand how important of this, and they try to help children. The environment, the world is in changing. Without education, the children grow up will not will have a difficulty to live either in the city or in the village. We need to prepare to help them. The number will drop from 8 million to maybe 6 million to 4 million. But as long as the children in the village, we need to help them to get prepared for their life.
Yeah. I know in some other studies that you've done, Professor Heckman, you find multi-generational effects. If you follow children through adulthood to when they become parents. You can even sometimes see effects of early interventions on the next generation. Do you think that might be true in this case?
Well, just based on what I've studied to point, yes, I would bet it is very, very much the case. But so far, our children are only about 3 or 4, maybe 5. So it's a little early. But yes, I would bet that this is a very strong effect, because what happens is that the children's lives themselves are enriched. And therefore, when they have children themselves, they're bringing children into a richer environment, and that then helps the next generation. So I think there are strong intergenerational effects. They're just beginning to be really fully understood, because in some other projects that we have here at the university, we do study now across 2 different projects now. One is a study in Michigan, another one in North Carolina, and finding very strong effects on the next generation. So it's remarkable and very reassuring. It means that what we think of as the effects, just looking at the current generation, is only a part of the story. There's another story that we've neglected because we had no data on it. And now there's evidence that it can be quite strong.
Remarkable. Professor Heckman, there's a question here about what's next for your research in China. Do you plan to expand or move in new directions in research in China?
Well, Jen can help answer that as well, because she's part of it. We have, of course, we're anxious to go forward with improving the projects that will be launched all over China from the CDRF network. So, there's a challenge that I think Lu Mai can talk about, that looking at nomads, for example, in northern China, northwestern China, living way up in the north. There are nomads, or I guess there would be Mongolians or Mongols. There would be basically sheep herders. And the idea of a home visit is very different even for them.
Yeah.
And so there's a challenge in terms of the structure of understanding how to reach the family and communicate with the family. Now, technology, electronics, the fact that we have a good computer technology in China will help with that. But there are other aspects as well. And this is some project that Lu Mai and I and Zhu Jen, so we're a team now. I hope we stay together for a while. We're thinking of doing an urban version of this in Shenzhen, which is more or less the Silicon Valley of China. So there is also a large population of migrants into Shenzhen. And the idea would be to see how we would adapt this kind of environment to an urban setting. But then on top of that, I think what is very exciting is that working with a group of people at a University of Science and Technology in Shenzhen, using and working with computer scientists and people working with artificial intelligence, developing much better systems to monitor child progress. So we can actually use kind of electronic media. I shouldn't even call it electronic, it sounds obsolete, but basically computer algorithms and computer to essentially then not only stimulate the children, but monitor them. And now, instead of weekly, we're going to be doing this hopefully daily, hourly, maybe in real time, in nanoseconds, who knows? But the idea is that's a challenge that we've been discussing. And if COVID hadn't intervened, we would have actually been working with them right now. We will be working. Zhu Jen, do you want to talk a little bit about that? You know that.
Yeah, so I just want to bring a little bit details since we have time limit. And one thing is we want to really go deep to see how the parent and child or home visitor and parent interaction to improve the children's skill development. That will bring the issue is how to have better measures of the interactions and how to have better measures of the children's skills. And so now, we want to bring more technology, like using AI and using, the machine learning or some AI technology to back up. And then we can try to study what is the optimal, strategy for the parents to interact with their children. because based on different, background, it may have different, interaction strategies. And the other thing is that will make us the research go to very deep way. And the other thing is to answer the question like nurture versus nature, and that will go to the research about the genetic analysis. That is also one direction from our perspectives we will go, and to collect more data about the parents' information and the children's information, and to see how the environment will change the children develop their skill, and what's the genetic component can affect the skill development. That is also another step of our research. So it's not just, briefly general say like interaction matters or like, the early childhood intervention matters. We really want to study what's the underlying, mechanism, and how to explain the people to learn the skills, and how to speed up the learning process.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting. And I wish that we could talk for another hour, but unfortunately we are at the end of our time.
Oh,
So
too bad.
I know it's just getting going. I want to know all the details. It's fantastic. So I want to thank each of you, Lu Mai, James Heckman, and Jin Shu. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. And I want to thank our audience as well for your time and attention. And for those who are continuing with the series, I want to let you know that there's an event on medical education reform on Tuesday evening, January 12th, or Wednesday morning if you're in China. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.